So, talking about the rise of digital audio advertising, of course, first we need to take a step back. Many people think that audio is something new. We're seeing kind of the renaissance of audio, but it's one of the oldest forms of advertising, one of the oldest form of mass reach. If you go through blog articles and industry articles today, you find many claim that audio has always been a one-on-one medium, which is surprising because if you look back when radio started, you see it was always considered as a one-to-many medium. It was after newspapers the first real broadcast medium. So I always have to take a step back and look historically at things. Let's excavate the future a little bit here. So in 1922, the first radio ad was added. And there's a story here from a magazine called Radio News from March 1922. They paint a vision of the future. The radio is going to take center stage. So imagine someone sitting in a club car of a super fast airplane service, and they're saying he puts a small rubber disc in his vest pocket and places it over his ear. A moment hence, you will receive a radio phone with the mental news of the world. Simultaneously, millions of other people all over the globe do the very same thing. Broadcasting by radio phone, this 1922 article predicts, has long displaced the daily newspaper. So when we talk today about stories of digital disrupts everything, we can see that our moment in time isn't so unique. Technology has always driven visions of the future, and always driven the idea that it would replace and reconfigure everything. So in a sense, radio was the internet of the 1920s. And indeed, if we go back to the kind of first charts, we can see that we saw a rapid ad growth in radio, as you can see here. So look at the newspaper spend. So when we read back, this is the US, is from Mr. Cohen, the first advertising forecaster in the world. We go back to just after the First World War. We see a newspaper spend, and as radio came in, which is the magenta-colored line here, you can see a dip in radio. In the newspapers. So radio, and this is exactly when these visions of the future were also written. And radio was continuing to grow to outperform newspapers. And we think that radio was going to displace everything. Then you see this other line, and TV crashed in. For the first time, radio actually received a dent in growth. So you can see stories of the future have always been part of advertising. Disruption has also always been part of advertising. Now, the first radio ad, according to many sources here, was actually done by AT&T. Where for a fixed price here, sponsors could appear on radio broadcasts, and AT&T was one of the first ones to do it. This is remarkable, again, if you look at disruption in the story of the internet, because if you remember, the first banner ad in the world in 1994, who did it? It was also AT&T. So there's a strange relationship. They're purely coincidence. But the main thing here is radio started very early with its monetization. And the inventors of radio, at the beginning of the 20th century, they were actually worried that we couldn't monetize it. They thought, what's the business model behind it? And although the AT&T ad was the first official ad, actually it was the creators of radio, the engineers, it was amateur broadcasters who were doing the first ads, who, when they played music on the gramophone and broadcasted via radio, actually took a fee to mention the record company. Now again, think about how podcasting came to rise. Again, the renaissance of radio, of audio today was in some part also driven by amateurs trying to find new business models. So it's remarkable to see when new industries emerge that things don't change so much over time. Let's go to today. Radio in 2018 in Europe. This is traditional radio, AM, FM radio, and DAB, excluding anything IP-based delivery. This is a €6 billion industry in terms of ad spend today. And you see the largest market, this is ranked here by market size. It's all gross ad spend, and I overlaid here the mobile broadband penetration per 100 households. So you can really see actually in some of the largest radio markets that have relatively lower mobile broadband penetration than other markets like the Netherlands or the Nordics. I'm showing this to say two things. The radio market is huge and ripe for disruption, and it kind of correlates, not exclusively, but in part, with how people can access digital audio services in other ways. So there are big markets to be disrupted, but also smaller markets where consumers have at least an infrastructure that's more ready for audio, digital. Why is this important? Because there's a fundamental change in the buying logic of advertisers and agencies. What you see here, and I showed this chart before, it shows when you do a media buy through an agency, what proportion of the spend really goes on buying the inventory, and what goes on what we call agency labor or value-added services, doing the creative, the analytics, the measurement, and so forth. And we see on the left side, traditional old school media, on the right side, the digital media. You can, of course, see how, with the explosion of inventory in digital and the need to measure in a very fragmented way, the relative importance of the media buy has gone down. Other services are more important. But what this also means for traditional media is that the changing logic, changing expectations of buyers when it comes to measurement, attribution, speed of insight, and so forth. And this digital logic is spilling over in all other media. You see it in the connected TV space. It's coming in the digital out-of-home space. And this is also what's coming in the radio space. Trade associations and radio broadcasters are thinking about innovation and they acknowledge they need to change things quickly and systematically, make the industry ready for an age where buyers think differently. In particular, as now also within agency teams, you have people that want to buy audio, but they're not traditional radio people, but more digital people. So a huge change is happening here culturally. This is underpinned by a really macro shift in how the music industry, a key part of the audio landscape, not everything, but a key part, is actually monetizing. Here we see a look in the UK, and it's similar in other European countries as well. You can see, if you look at the total income of the music industry total we've down here, we can see that streaming is now the largest part of the industry. This is, of course, digital streaming. Downloads are actually declining over time, digital downloads. So it's always on streaming. And this is extremely powerful, of course, if you think about the rise of digital audio and its monetization. You can clearly see where all the growth is coming from. So it's not just about advertising, it's about the foundations of the industry that are changing and creating a foundation for digital audio advertising to scale and become relevant. At the same time, you see, with all broadband penetration and audio available, you see more and more podcasts, for instance, being launched. This is from Chartable, a podcast tracking platform in the US. And you can just see the number of podcasts launched have exploded in the last 2 years. After things have bubbled on for a long time, suddenly there's an explosion. You could ask, why now? We've had the iOS App Store. We had baked podcasts before. We had broadband penetration before. Now this content is emerging. Other forms of narration are becoming interesting as people get either tired of visual media, want something else, and suddenly there are new spaces of time that can be exploited through advertising, for instance, also through media consumption. The connected car, for instance, is a major driver, in particular in the US, as commutes are longer, and this is really driving podcasts, particularly news podcasts. You can clearly see this here. This is just going to increase. If you look at what cars are being sold in the future, by 2025, every car that's rolling on production lines will be connected or connectable to the internet. And if you look at the installed base, which is basically cars on the road, you can see how many there are actually over time. And this, again, is a critical driver to change how audio content is being consumed, from AM, FM radio to something else. Important to note, though, another macro picture is that the traditional age-groups for entertainment, and we have that here on this slide, it's very small, but the important bit is again the magenta color, the 50 to 64-year-old segment. It's not growing in Europe. It's growing faster in other regions. And although there's a large population available, it's a fairly static population, which means that audio has to stay in a market that, from a perspective of addressable consumers, is going to be fairly the same. And just when you join us here, welcome everyone. In the middle of talking about digital audio, I just have some macroeconomic statistics right here. And you can see, if you look at other countries or other regions, there's of course a much stronger growth, but the foundation, the base is quite strong.
What figures?
Sorry, this is
because I can see
exactly. Or you can see it up here. So this is overall the number of people in a given age group in the region of the world. Digital audio, zooming in, is still a fairly nascent market. Around 350 million euros we think is worth currently in Europe. That is excluding, again, AM, FM radio, it's excluding DAB radio, it's just IP-based delivery. Everything from online streaming platforms to the digital innovations that radio broadcasters have put to the market. But it's going to grow quickly to a 1.5 billion euro market. And you can clearly see the drivers. The podcasts that I mentioned are a driver. Using streaming services, getting more subscribers and having longer time on the platform is key. And also the radio players themselves, the traditional radio companies, are actually innovating. They're building a lot of solutions to put their content out digitally over IP-based delivery. Now, we don't see that smart speakers have a direct influence on listening time, but they act as a door opener to make audio content, digital audio content, more common. It's just with Alexas, with other devices being installed, there's a cultural shift that these devices are bringing to the ground, but they're not actually good as advertising media. We saw many campaigns that failed. There was a very famous one, an infamous one from Burger King, for instance, which was using a Hello Google command over TV in its to activate Google Home in the viewers' living rooms to read the Burger King recipes of Wikipedia. And people didn't like this intrusion, and some actually edited the Wikipedia entry to change the ingredients of the Whopper. So this backfired. But the other thing is, of course, that measurement becomes better for login-based services, for instance, and you see scale coming with login alliances, for instance, from radio broadcasters. And if you look at the revenue, the majority of it is actually mobile today. Already in Europe, it's around 80%, and around 75% is in the US, so Europe actually leads ahead here. We got healthy CPMs, which kind of indicate the value of audio, but also show it's a nascent market. So if you look at streaming platforms, and this is data from buyers and what we could find from price lists, on streaming services, this is your usual CPM, Euro 5 to 20, SoundCloud a bit lower, but also healthy, and podcasts were expensive. And I saw some podcasts going for CPMs of around 600 euros. So it's very, very expensive, but mostly also because it's so niche. And as scale continues to grow, CPMs will go down. So we see two things. There's even with scale platforms, still a healthy pricing model. CPMs are higher than banner inventory, more in the video inventory range. And we can see from the podcast world how high these CPMs are. It's an incredibly nascent, very early market. What's happening? There are 4 factors that are underpinning the renaissance of audio. There's premium inventory with a low risk of fraud and a high degree of transparency where the ad is actually shown, and not so that many options available. There are very few platforms and podcasts can be pre-created. You can do it programmatically and high degree of control, and also most things are set up on an I/O basis, so the issues in the display world don't really apply. You also see a very high share of voice. That's something very, very hard to do in display. And lastly, we see massive opportunities of creative optimization that are not really available in the desktop or the video world because visual formats take space and are expensive to adapt and edit. So a dynamic banner campaign maybe has 5 different banners, but in audio, I'm going to show you in a second, there will be thousands of combinations that you can do per campaign. We saw some hurdles to growth being removed recently. So we saw at large a change in agencies of who buys this audio inventory. It moved from the radio buyers and their traditional clients to the digital teams. So other buyers that are comfortable with data, comfortable experimenting, and addressing other advertisers. And we saw standardization with different ways earlier how we could buy audio inventory. And these competing standards or different standards cause confusion. And a new standard creates a new single marketplace. It's actually compatible with other formats as well. As you can see here, if you look at the Spotify ads, the new vast 4.1 standard works on audio, but also works on video and on display. So it puts a foundation for omni-channel campaigns where audio isn't just completely removed from the rest, but it actually is part of the bigger piece. I want to show you dynamic creative. This is from a UK company called A Million Ads, which specializes in dynamic creative. And here we see a campaign for a travel company consists of 12,500 ads. Imagine doing that in the video or in the banner world. I hope you can see what this means on the screen. So here's the campaign flow, basically. I have, in anticipation of a small screen, laid this out for you, what each means. So this is a travel campaign, and we have Birmingham, Glasgow, and other airports. Based on location, the campaign starts, so there's an audio tune, then selects it dynamically what place the listeners in starts at the Birmingham airport or Glasgow airport in the narration of the ad. And then looks at the current weather. What's the weather where you are? Should there be an upbeat message about good weather to reaffirm that you're in a great location, and so forth. It looks which holiday destinations can you fly from these airports? Mallorca, Tunisia, you name it. And it adds those in the spot as well. It looks at the temperature of a specific destination, saying, now we're in Birmingham, the weather's terrible. Why don't you fly to Tenerife? The weather here is 25 degrees. The next flight to Tenerife, or anywhere else, goes in 4 hours. And then it concludes with a call to action. So you can really see how dynamic creative and audio allows you on a Lego kit basis to structure campaigns in a very, very different way than is currently possible, even in more established formats. The key question, of course, is for many in this room and in the virtual room here, what about programmatic? How programmatic is audio? What of this 1.5 billion market by 2023 is going to be programmatic? Now, we need to take a step back and say, how does the infrastructure currently look? And the pipes are being laid or have been laid. As you can see here, buy side and sell side, collaborations, acquisitions, partnerships, and so forth. So we see the emergence of a complex Lumascape of who works with whom, and we also see already consolidation. What is interesting, that media companies, like a radio company, IAB or Jelly, we saw Pandora students for ads with both on the buy and the sell side, and so forth. We saw RMS, it was a German radio sales house from the traditional world. It built its own DMP to power digital audio ads. This is remarkable because if you look at how the display and the video world emerged, you saw the tech companies being fairly independent, standalone, for a very long time before media owners said, yes, we need to own our stack. So we see even in this very nascent and emerging world, already stacks being built. Companies have learned from what it means to not have a stack, or not have good integrations, from the previous experience in the banner and in the desktop world. The remarkable thing really is that it's companies across the board, from the streaming landscape to the big platforms like Google, but also to the traditional incumbents in the radio space. But the market is too small to be sized accurately, and I'm diving into that a little bit And here we go. Digital audio in context. We said it's going to be a 1.5 billion market by 2023. If you look at 2018, we can hardly discern it on this chart. So here we put next to it, from our IAB Europe ADEX report, the total display market, including social, is 23 billion in Europe. If you remove social, we're still stuck with 11 billion. You get around 350 million for audio. So it's a fraction of that, around 3% of the display market, excluding social. And programmatic is so small, it's extremely hard to measure. There are no official figures, and it's more around the network. The best thing we can do is look at Spotify, for instance, which is one of course, the largest audio streaming platforms in the world, and understand what is their programmatic revenue. And the H1 report states total global ad revenue of $291 million. And 25% of that is programmatic. That isn't just audio. It includes video, it includes banner, and Spotify's revenues are currently split 30-30-30, but it's unclear that around 30% of all this is really, of the programmatic bit is really audio programmatic. So we're dealing, even for the largest player, with a fairly small part of the market. Growing rapidly, but we have to be honest and distinguish hype from content. Because there are a few limitations that really need to be overcome to unlock the power of programmatic audio. The first is, there's a disconnect between the explosion of engagement that consumers have with audio content and actually the bit that can be monetized for ads. A lot of it is subscription-based or ad-free. So if you look just at consumption statistics, the addressable market looks bigger than the one that can really be captured through ads. Also, and some contest this, but some say it's important, that the underlying programmatic infrastructure was built for display and later video and not for audio. Others are saying this has already been fixed. All our DSPs or our SSPs work extremely well and smoothly with audio. But the fact that it's a point of debate in the industry alone shows that there's at least education to be done how programmatic audio can be bought and what it actually is. The third thing is data. It's limited return path data. Hardly any analytics, in particular in the podcasting space, and no measurement. Again, logging-based solutions, large platforms have it easier, but it really showed when RMS was building the DMP how that they knew immediately that the most important thing is to have data to make this attractive, to make this accountable. And there is, despite the explosion of content, still a layer of scale. If we narrow it down to specific audiences, beyond broad demographics. We said many advertisers want to use audio as a one-on-one medium, an intimate conversation. The listening time in aggregate isn't so big that you can actually segment audiences in a very, very narrow way often. Also, you see a crucial podcast market, which we'll dive in later. It actually relies on the trust relationship with the podcaster or the host of the show and the advertiser. This is a personal message, something that is not going to go through, at least not going to go through RTB or scaled programmatic. The only thing we can imagine here is that there is a booking platform that allows the host or the podcaster to automate workflows. So this is a very different way of programmatic, a different thinking of how programmatic could and should work than in the world of display and video that we are used to. Also, we see that if we move outside of SoundCloud, outside of Deezer, outside of Spotify, that the inventory that we have available is very fragmented. In terms of local radio stations, local podcasts, different platforms, all with their own measurement or no measurement at all, different integrations. So getting all the inventory that we have and making it scalable is hard. And then there's the thing we already looked at. You see, the true power of audio, as you see it, is not really not only as standalone, but as being part and parcel of a broader media plan, maybe a broader programmatic strategy. But again, we need to bring all these channels together and have the right people in place that can actually manage this complexity. That's the last point as well. Once the audio campaign is running, we need to see what are the relevant metrics. Because we need to think as buyers, as sellers, And as agencies, we need to think, what do we want to look at? Just the CPM? There's no click-through rate, there's a listen-through rate, there's a mute rate, all these things. While many experts in the industry speak about these things, it will take education and time to bring this to everybody. But we can see there's a heated market, in particular in the podcasting world, that shows that maturity is coming rapidly. Look at Spotify, for instance. They bought a podcast network, Gimlet, which hosts many third-party podcasts. They bought Anchor. It's a suite of tools that allows podcasters to build and edit their podcasts, to add monetization solutions, and so forth. A kit, a self-serve kit for podcasters to make more, better content and to monetize it. Similar to what YouTube offers its creators, if you will. And they also bought a specialist podcast company, Podcast, that focuses on true crime. And now think about, when you look at this combination of acquisitions, what this reminds you of. The streaming wars in the video world, the Netflixes, the Amazons, and so forth. It's about building an end-to-end ecosystem that allows distribution of content through streaming, hosting of original content or content through network, monetization incentives, and original content that is genuine and only available on your platform. And indeed, if you look at a quote from Spotify's SEC filings, it said, well, we want to acquire more, and when I said on total spend around 500 million in multiple acquisitions in 2019. Only did these three buys, and if you do the maths, I see, well, only spent 404 million. This was in the beginning of the year, given an Anchor and Podcast was in April. So you see rapidly how rapidly they're building this ecosystem. It's not just Spotify, but Spotify has been particularly aggressive because they have a key competitor. The future for podcasting, advertising and the whole ecosystem is currently better in the US because of the strong Apple dominance. If you look at this chart of the podcast player market share, you see Apple dominant. Spotify will be much stronger in Europe, but you can see the size of the addressable market in the US, one language, two, it's such a big price and so much easier to do than Europe. So Spotify has to attack Apple in order to generate competitive market position. This will shape the debate in Europe as well. You can already see why. Apple, of course, with its own OS, has an ingrained podcasting platform on many, many iOS devices, premium users. You can see Spotify has already started original production deals focusing on the US as a price market, similar to what Netflix was doing, Spotify originals. They're scaling through third-party platforms and they're building this end-to-end life cycle for this business. Indeed, podcasting is growing fast with a compound annual growth rate in Europe of 52%. It's the average growth rate for the next 5 years. But the market is even smaller than the audio market overall. It's just 22.7 million, we estimate. It's around 12 million in the UK, and the rest is kind of other markets. You see this scale quickly to around 10 times the size to 207 million. If you put it next to the US, it's still minuscule. You can see it's the size of the US market, and also, as I mentioned earlier, the drive time in the US, the time people spend in cars, is a key driver for podcasting. But you can see Europe is growing extremely quickly, but from a low base. So we see by 2023, if you add Europe and US together, Europe will be about 12% of the US market. The interesting thing is that despite this close relationships that podcast advertisers seek with the hosts and the podcasters, we see the dynamic insertion of ads is going on the rise. This doesn't need to be programmatic, often it's not, but it shows that there's this workflow automation happening. And indeed, you can see if you look at, this is something from the US, the buy type, programmatic is actually tiny, just 1 to 2%. But you can see that the pricing model is very similar on the right side here to the display world, to the video world CPM basis. What's remarkable is if you look, and again, this is from the US, who advertises on podcasts. And we see a lot in our industry about direct-to-consumer brands, the little kids on the block, who are driving incremental spend. And you can see it's new brands, predominantly, also others, but it's these new brands that are willing to experiment to reach a new audience. So there is an overusage of this new platform from new ad spenders. So opportunity, it's often incremental money coming to the industry that wasn't there before. We also think, if you look at the right side, there are many new platforms available that help platformize the industry, make it easier for measurement and attribution. I think this quote from the agency executive is kind of key. They see a strong interest in the podcasting space, but can we quantify what the ads work? Maybe. So this is the key hurdle, the glass ceiling the industry has to go through if it wants to move beyond experimental budgets, measurability and reliability. There's also something separate, which is the idea of voice. Will often be different from audio, different from streaming, different from podcasting, which also influences the ad industry a lot. We can see the amount of devices being installed in homes, and this is just the hardware stuff, not the software stuff, is growing massively. And by 2020, we have 7 billion voice assistants installed, hardware voice assistants. And 7% of marketers today, based on Deloitte, see this now as a priority. We look at the Alexa skills available by country. There are over 80,000 in total. Mostly in the US, but other markets in Europe also as well. But this is a blessing and a curse for the future of the industry if you want to advertise on voice, for instance, or if you want to use voice as an owned media channel, which many do. Because there's so many daily additions of new voice skills. If you look at the year-on-year growth, it's incredible. That the discoverability of your skill is not very good. On the one hand, it helps grow the platform, like the Android platform group, like the iOS App Store group, and so forth. But it makes it hard for brands to find or to make their tools discoverable. There's also a problem when it comes to the power of voice. This is if you design voice interaction as a massive cost of innovation. I can show you this with a chatbot example. On the right side, you can see the coverage of things that a chatbot can actually do, questions a chatbot can answer. And you can see complexity growing over time. And what happens is, it's fairly easy to answer basic questions that many people ask. Let's say you are in the postal department. Maybe the DHL or something like this. Where's my package? Very easy. But there are other things that become very complicated to engineer, like where did I send the package to my grandma yesterday? And meaning it costs a lot to collect all these new inquiries that people send and to make them part of the platform. Which means voice is a problem now. There's a massive hype around voice, new established assistants, but the cost of innovating beyond basic forms of interaction is often too high. So we are, I think, entering, in that sense, a voice winter, where we're going through a period where, despite innovation, consumers won't necessarily see or recognize or acknowledge it. There is, you can see, a complicated way how brands could advertise on voice. It's a huge ecosystem. If you look on the top, you could do things with voice direct. You can have your own branded skills. You could do, for instance, in the companies like Voice Labs, run ads on other people's skills. You can have your oral, your sound identity as a brand, move away from a visual identity. You can also do monitoring of what happens, how do these devices work, and sort of optimize against them. You can also, what many do is put ads on TV or in the newspaper or magazines to drive people to download your skill. And for many, optimization also means search engine optimization because, of course, Google Home uses Google and Bing uses, Alexa uses Bing. So SEO is key for voice success. A reality check, though, is that voice is increasingly becoming intertwined with video again. So voice assistants are moving again to a kind of omni-channel world, if you will, where advertising on voice is maybe not the most important thing, but we can move, actually take things from the display world as many of the voice assistants actually get streamed. And lastly, to close, we always have to think when we look at the opportunity with voice, that marketing is bigger than advertising. You see many people, many companies moving budget out of paid media to other channels, to customer loyalty, to owned media, and so forth. The biggest growth we're actually seeing, or the biggest successes we're seeing as well in voice, is when it comes to loyalty. Because McDonald's recently bought a voice starter, and also to own media, to connect your brand with a voice skill and to advertise for other media. So we can see voice and audio itself is a complex world, already very, very fragmented. We've got radio, we've got streaming, we've got podcasts, we've got voice overall. It's growing rapidly from a small base. The key challenges are measurement and scale, but it's an attractive channel for advertising. And we think it's going to be a 1.5 billion industry by 2023 that can support many players, and we see particularly many smaller and local players having the chance to succeed in this space, which is good for Europe and the European ad economy overall. Thank you very much, and I look forward to your questions.
Any questions from the room before we have a look at some of the questions coming from the panel?
Just for CPM,
Yeah.
you speak about 50 and $80. Is it podcast native or podcast that are created by radios?
Do you want to repeat the questions?
Yeah. So the question was about the CPMs. So you said whether it was on digital radio, right? I understand, or
Yeah, it's
on the
kind of radio who make a program.
Yeah.
Put the program in podcast.
Yeah.
And there is a podcast native.
Yeah.
Say, media program directly created by.
But these are typically podcast native. Yeah. The big ones we saw 80 to 120 euros. This is podcast native. Now, of course, it's still a massive market. So anything that's new that people want with an experimental budget can have a high price and a high margin for the seller and the intermediary.
And about the price from UK and Germany.
Yeah.
And what about the price in the United States?
The price in the US is much lower. You see podcasts vary between, prices vary by reach. You can say it's about $20 for something that has a low reach and $29 for something that's high reach. So we're in the kind of $20 to $30 range. And we probably see Europe moving in the direction within the next 2 years, 2 or 3 years. So there will be a massive CPM erosion. Of course, the scale is going to be there, so that doesn't matter. It's actually, for me, lower CPMs that are not to the bottom CPMs, but lower CPMs are actually a sign of the maturity of the industry.
I just have a quick question here from someone about consumer acceptance when it comes to audio ads compared to traditional kind of digital ads. And it's saying that obviously that typically for audio you have a subscription service and it's understood that you either pay the money and you don't get any ads or you don't pay it, but consumers tend to accept that model more. Why is it not so accepted when it comes to digital then?
The question is whether in a subscription environment,
why is it that consumers, when it comes to audio ads, accept that they're happy to listen to it because they don't have to pay the subscription? But if they visit a traditional publisher or a news website, there's still less acceptance to have ads, but they still don't want to pay for content.
That's a good question. I can only speculate. We don't have any data on that. I didn't do a survey, but it's clearly with how consumers are being conditioned. Things are being conditioned that the internet is for free, and the internet has always been the visual internet. So audio is different. And I can just imagine that people do not equate it with the internet experience overall. It might be a case of execution as well, how the audio ads are executed. But what would be interesting to see in a study is as many podcasts are now, for instance, on different platforms. You have them on Facebook, on Spotify, on others, whether the ad acceptance changes by platform for the same podcast or for the same piece of content.
And then just got another question just about your going back to the different verticals that are spending at the moment in audio, and you said obviously the direct consumer brands. Have you got any more findings or research behind some of the other brands? You gave a good example there.
I mean, in Europe we only have kind of anecdotal evidence so far, and there are many different brands coming in. We see insurance, we're seeing fast-moving consumer goods coming in, we're seeing car brands coming in. It comes from, if you remove the D2C bit, it comes from a range of different sectors. And it really is less about the sector these days, but more about, is the company willing to try something else? And being experimentative, trying something new, depends less on what sector you're in and more what type of company you are, and also what relationship, for instance, you have with your media agency. So I would say outside of the D2C bit, which is digital native brand for digital native consumers, depends more on the individual company.
And I can't remember whether we covered it. Someone's asking, compared to average time spent, consumer time spent, different mediums, how does the audio time compare to traditional TV, online usage?
We're seeing, despite more digital channels available, TV time fairly constant for all the demographics, but of course going down rapidly. It's going faster for younger demographics. Using for audio is it often slots into existing habits when you listen to music, but you just use different transmission type. You now use IP delivery, or it slots in your commutes, for instance. So it replaces traditional radio consumption. We do not necessarily see an overall up of audio consumption. Times you traditionally listen to something, be it music, be it an album, be it radio, is being replaced by digital.
Okay, and then just going back to the hype thing, if this isn't, you said here you had the stats that kind of differentiated the hype and the reality. Yeah. Do you think it will become more reality in the next 12 months?
I don't think in the next 12 months, more in the next 24 months. It takes time to build the infrastructure. It takes time to educate the industry. It takes time for the available inventory to grow. So from all sides, from the creator side, from the infrastructure side, and from the industry education side, and the measurement side, things need to come in place, and we know that takes longer. And only when these things are there, the spend will follow.
So I've got a question about audiobooks. Any monetizing cases?
We haven't looked at that, I'm afraid. Audiobooks are interesting, but we haven't looked at specifically whether that would be something ad supported. Given that quick content, like news content, entertainment content, you have a much higher volume of production. It lends itself easier to add monetization than books, I would say.
As in traditional books as well.
I haven't seen a big market for
that. The share of audio in the display market is 3%. And in France, I think it's only 1%.
Yeah.
And what are the other countries in Europe who boost?
Yes. So the question is, I repeat for fun, the question from the room is, if you look at the overall display market, the share of audio now is under 3% in Europe. We just have an expert here in Paris who said that in France it's around 1%. So where does this 3% come from right now, and which other countries will grow? It is currently heavily skewed to the UK, and we're seeing a lot of innovation in Germany coming as well. With the size of the market, the UK is the largest, followed by Germany and France, and then come the Netherlands, Spain, Italy, and so forth. And the UK is going to grow, I think, at around a 60% compound annual growth rate. France and Germany a bit slower for the next 2 years, but then a fast acceleration to 80, 90% for a year or 2 years. But the overall market, you could say the top 5 countries in Europe currently make out about 80%. The top 6 countries with the Netherlands make around 80% of the digital audio market, and all the rest is not together.
What about the Nordics? They're quite innovative and
Yeah.
is it the same thing, lower than 1%?
It's higher, probably, but the market overall is very small. This will change in the next couple of years because you're very mature digital ad markets in Sweden, in Denmark, and in Norway. But the overall market is very small right now. It also depends on, let's say, is there enough original content in the native language? How diverse is the content? So a problem for Europe is that you don't have this one market like the US that depends heavily on the population because the content has to be generated from scratch. In contrast to video, or in contrast to TV, for instance, there's no subtitling audio. So it has to be often local content. Otherwise, the content is being monetized from someone listens, let's say, from an international podcast. It's not monetized from somewhere else. I haven't seen yet that the smart international integration.
I've just got a question just about measurement. Have you seen any trends in how do you measure the success of an audio campaign? Who's doing it? What's happening in that space?
So there's some new companies that have emerged, podcast analytics companies, for instance. Chartable is one. And we're seeing kind of many players using hacks to try to make it work, trying to put tracking pixels into podcasts and so forth. But it's pretty haphazard. But it's like survey-based, and the first companies to do it come from the US, and streaming platforms have a better chance of doing
it. That's it at the moment.
Right, I think we're closing on time. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, everyone. And we should just say that the next Economics Trends Forum is not on audio, it's on connected TV, so we'll be sending everyone details on that soon. So we'll be getting from the listening to the short thing.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Goodbye from Paris. Thank you.